There's also this thing called user error. I'm not arrogant enough to say I don't have user error. All right, let's jam, friends. So welcome, y'all. Welcome to your week two of Ancient Wisdom for Modern Times, an introduction to mindfulness meditation. Um, for those who are just joining, please put your name and land acknowledgement if you care to in the chat. For those, if you want to do it again. And the other thing I'd like you to put in the chat is a weather report, right? So how are you today? So if you were a meteorologist and like had to describe your mood today in meteorological terms, like what would that mean? So for me, I'm partly cloudy with sun and wind. And here's why. Like partly cloudy because it's literally raining in my part of the world. Sunshine because I had the most amazing day today that didn't involve. So I basically had a reprise of my former life pre-pandemic, but I'm not exhausted, right? So I'm pretty stoked about that. And windy because the winds of change are here, and as someone who likes to stir the pot, that makes me smile. You know what I mean? So like the status quo, my job in life is cloudy tornado watch. Damn, right? It's speckles of sun. Yeah, and take a look at how we're showing up today, um, just so we can be aware of what we're bringing into the space. So again, please feel to show up as you are. So camera off or on. Dense fog, I hear that. Heavy weather for sure, right? And this exercise, the weather report, is also like a mindfulness exercise, right? Like rather than just blowing into something, how are you, right? So checking in with you to see how you are and then sharing that with other people, right? So let's just go. Blessings and best wishes to all. Welcome to class number two. It's my honor to welcome you to the series. And I'd like to also talk about some agreements. So we're not going to stay on this too long, but I think it's important because this is Sangha for me. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term Sangha, it's sacred space. And so as we enter into sacred space, there's some norms that I operate under and would like to extend that to other people just so we're aware. So as we settle in, the agreements that I like to offer in this shared container for learning, healing, and exploration are that we recognize the difference between intent and impact, that we assume the best intentions, even as language is inexact, right? Everything is upside down right now, right? So like sometimes elegance and eloquence are the things that escape us first when things are topsy-turvy. That we are present and attentive to our personal needs as well as the needs of the group. So if you need to dip or you need to cut off your camera, or you need to get up and walk around, that you tend to your needs in this moment, but do so in a way that doesn't impact like the needs of the group. That we embrace the spirit of curiosity rather than critique, right? There's a whole bunch of this on earth right now. Number one, you got better things to do with your blood pressure than throw shade on someone or yourself. So real talk. And the second part is that like curiosity is the magic of life, right? Critique is so dead and boring. Curiosity, what about this? Like that's fun, right? So embrace curiosity. And the last norm is that we be free to try on something new, right? And if it doesn't feel right, step away. So if you're into that, either put a thumbs up in the chat or an emoji or give me a thumb. Hella thumbs, appreciate that. Cool. So a few acknowledgments and housekeeping, and then we'll dive in. So I acknowledge I'm on Piscataway land in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. So again, I do this as number one, as someone that has native descent, but also the history that we are fed is a lie, y'all. And I don't get down like that, right? I like to embrace the fullness of history, even when it's uncomfortable. I acknowledge the Asian lineages of these practices, right? So this isn't expressly Buddhist, but this is in the lineage of Asian Buddhist tradition, specifically the tradition of Ajahn Chah, the Thai forest tradition of Buddhism, as shared by Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach. That's my training. I also acknowledge the lineage of Thich Nhat Hanh and the Zen Buddhist lineage, of which Roshi Joan Halifax is one of my teachers as well. And lastly, and not leastly, I acknowledge my ancestors, right? And encourage you to acknowledge your ancestors in whatever way befits you. So I usually, when I teach this mala, is dedicated to my ancestors. So every time I teach, I give gratitude and thanks, not just to those for whom I'm blood related, but the thousands of teachers over thousands of years that have like shared these practices, of which I get to share. Right. So I acknowledge my ancestors, not only in my biological lineage, but my spiritual lineage as well. And one last housekeeping thing. Many of y'all know this, but just to repeat, this class is donation based, right? So this is not about money for me. This mindfulness practice has been such a blessing to me that I freely offer it. If you care to offer financial remuneration in return, gratitude. But donation also is your full attention, right? Sharing this on your social media account, being present, and sharing your experience, right? Like, so there are different ways to donate. My desire, as I shared last week, is to offer simple techniques in these crazy times to reduce suffering in your life, right? That's the goal of this. Like, if there's other benefit, ashe. If not, ashe. Right. So with that, let's have a recap of last week. So you don't have to respond if you. So I gave everyone an invitation to practice. So I even made it easy for you. I gave you the timestamp on the video, right? So you didn't have to search for it. So if you had an occasion to practice this week, either through recitation or review of the mindfulness video that we did last week, if you have any reflections on your practice, either put it in the chat or raise your hand using the emoji, and we'd just love to hear if and how revisiting mindfulness practice has helped you this week. And if you didn't, no shade, I totally dig it. But the point of this series is to get you into the habit. So think of this as like spirit, like barbell lifting, right? Like we're getting our mindfulness weight up, right? So that when circumstances come, we can just kind of be like, and then like attack, as opposed to, oh shit, so-and-so said this about me, and then totally freak out, right? So for those of you newer to me, I curse from time to time. If you don't like it, tell my mom, she already knows, right? It's coming from the heart. So any reflections about, Monica, dígame.
Hello, everybody. I have definitely been using some mindful breathing practices every day. I hate driving a lot, like so much. And I drive probably over 10 hours just for work a week.
Oh shit, okay, wow.
Yeah. So I will listen to Thich Nhat Hanh and I'll do breathing techniques, and I really needed it this week because work got super crazy. 3 of my coworkers that I teach with were all out with COVID, and we were like bare bones, and the kids were, really feeling all the change too. So it helped me to be more present with them and also hold more compassion for when they were like screaming and like wanting to fight with each other. Just be like, whoa. Instead of getting mad, I was able to just be there and like be the calming presence that they needed since they were not. So it's definitely been helpful.
Yeah, gratitude for the share. Isn't that amazing, right? It's amazing. Like, for those of you who are just getting to know me, this peaceful thing is new to me. I used to like come in raging hot, like all the time, and so I love teaching this stuff because I'm here to be the living example of how it works, right? You know, Patty talked about like swearing being her second language. Yeah, it's my native tongue. Right, right. Not that it's a competition or whatever, but like swearing's my native tongue. I grew up listening to Richard Pryor and Red Fox comedy albums, so to some extent, I don't have a choice. But Monica, thank you for the share and thank you for contextualizing that because when we put this in practice, it shows up in ways that you're just like, did that really just whoa, right. And shout out to those who hate driving. I'm in that club as well. Anyone else care to offer any reflections either about general mindfulness practice or anything that occurred to you in the past week? You don't have to. I just want to offer space. This is Sangha after all. Going once, twice, seen. Um, so to recap from last week, before we dive into this week's topic, um, mindfulness, as a definition we offered, is non-judgmental loving awareness, right? It's the journey that begins with an invitation to pause and discover your innate dignity that exists between accumulated notions and the shoulds and the oughts, right? No one talks to me that way. They should. That's not who you are. Right? Don't they know who I am? Do you know who you are? Right? Like, so I'm of the opinion that mindfulness, and this is what Jack Kornfield talks about, mindfulness is the art of living, right? It's being present with your life and not lost in the fantasies of the future or the reruns of the past. It's to be fully where you are. And by training this capacity of presence, quoting Jack here, you can calm and quiet the mind, open the heart, and learn to see and work with the different energies of your life and respond with wise action. Wow. Just like, whoa, right? That's a beautiful experience. We also talked about the exercise of mindfulness as embracing the sacred pause, right? So we use the analogy of the yellow traffic light. So again, like to revisit, when most people see a yellow traffic light, they blow through that beat, just like whatever, I ain't stopping for nothing. And I think that's an appropriate analogy for life, right? Like we rush, 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 go, 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 go. For what? Because it's a thought pattern that we've gotten accustomed to, maybe addicted to, and that can be checked and changed, right? So mindfulness is that sacred pause that allows you to like revisit either assumptions or breathe deeper or like, why am I acting this way? Oh, my jaw's hella tight. You know what I mean? So like giving yourself that space to see what's really going on. Beth, that's what's up, right? And so how did the analogy fit? How did it work for other people? You can type it or unmute yourself if you want. Um, we did a body scan and briefly touch on the mindfulness of breath, right? So today we'll go deeper into thought, and we'll go deeper into the breath next week. And basically, we're gonna. Most people who teach this stuff go. One of the things I am as a teacher is like I'm totally myself, right? So like part of it is just like I'm 48 years old and black and been doing my own thing for most of my life. The other part is that like there is no applicability. Like reciting a script without a modern context doesn't land. It doesn't serve, right? That's like if I came in singing Bing Crosby, y'all be like, who's that? Right? So making it a bit more contemporary, not on some remix stuff, but like on some some contemporary awareness stuff is my goal for this. And so most people teach mindfulness of body, breath, thought, and emotions. I view thoughts as, Lisa, right? I view thoughts as a sense, right? So if we did a body awareness scan, the next sense is the mind, right? And then when we get control of breath, you can calm the mind, clear energy in the body. So for me, I've taken that liberty, and for my teacher who've used this, you shouldn't be surprised by what I just did or said, because it's done with integrity, but it's also done in a way that the teachings sit with me. But before we do anything about mindfulness of thought, how about we just sit for about 60 seconds, right? So before we sit, shrug the shoulders, maybe you massage the face, maybe you massage the hands, but find some level of organic movement that sheds the day, that sheds the week, maybe even sheds the lifetime. And bring mindful awareness to how the body is showing up today. I love the weather reports that y'all put in there. So 15 more seconds of just what you need to do to settle into your body. You can shake, you can rattle, you can roll. And then just settle into your seat. Find a seat that allows you to feel relaxed, spacious, dignified, and comfortable. And we're just going to sit for a minute in community as a sacred transition from recap to this week's offering. Timer starts now. Slowly gather your senses, and as you're ready, open the eyes, regain your focus. Welcome back. So let's talk about mindfulness of thought, loved ones. And before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what meditation is and what meditation isn't, right? Because a lot of people, for all my teachers here, yoga teachers, meditation teachers, if we had $1 for every time someone's like, I can't meditate because I can't get my mind to stop thinking, or I can't do yoga because I can't touch my toes, or like I'm not flexible. Well, number one, is the point, right? Like we practice to gain those strengths, number one. But number two, especially with respect to meditation, for some reason, there's a prohibitive notion in the Western zeitgeist, especially the United States, that thinks meditation's inaccessible because we can't stop thinking. And I'll just make it plain, y'all. To wish the mind to stop thinking is like hoping the sun doesn't shine, right? It's like wishing gravity to not hold things in place, right? Or asking the lungs not to breathe, right? The function of the mind is to think, to process, to those sorts of things. And thoughts in and of themselves are not harmful. It's how we attach to the thoughts that causes harm. I mean, I can just say a thought right now. I think that basketball sucks. First of all, I don't believe that. But like that thought is just words, right? If I like got angry about it and got in somebody's face, that's when thoughts become harmful, or that's when thoughts become like more powerful than they actually are, right? And how many of us have heard the phrase or said the phrase getting lost in thought? Right? That's one of the things that's common in our culture. And that's where the mind can begin to exert undue control over our lived experience, right? We have to, and the thing about mindfulness of thoughts is it brings us into some of the conscious or subconscious scripts that we have in our minds that impact how we experience, right? Our lives are a miracle, right? To be alive and healthy in this present moment is divine. And sometimes our thoughts get in the way of celebrating that divinity. That's why mindfulness of thought is important, right? Because for years, and I'll speak about myself for a moment, is that scripts of anger, self-loathing, and internalized depression were what were in my head all the time. And that impacted my life, my relationships, my blood pressure. I had like stress-induced psoriasis because of just the loop that was in my head, right? And, you know, there are elements of our lives that have nothing to do with analytical thought, right? So if you've seen like the beauty of a sunrise, or if you've heard the giggle of children on a playground, right? There are levels of sublime that have nothing to do with what you think about it, right? That sound bowl that you heard, it brought your levels down because it's precognitive, right? Like sound vibration goes directly, it doesn't matter what you think about it. Like the brain is just like, whoo, right? Because it's precognitive. And when we get beyond like critique and we get more connected to the beauty and mystery of life, that's the domain of the heart. And that's our home. Like the home is like our heart is our true nature, right? And so to further illustrate where and how we can begin to like express the domain of thought, I'll quote the Dalai Lama because you can never go wrong when you quote His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama says, sometimes your thoughts do not have your best interest in mind. Right? And for those of you who've seen His Holiness, he usually chuckles after he says that. Like it's just it's the cutest thing. But like sometimes our thoughts don't have our interests in mind. Think about that. Pun intended, right? If your thoughts don't have your best interest in mind, then how awesome and powerful of a tool is it to be able to recalibrate your thoughts, right? Or because I used to work on Capitol Hill and I can't avoid saying this, sometimes our thoughts are fake news. Right? So we can hate on 45 all we want to. We be having fake news too. Right? And so again, not as critique, but more for curiosity. So for those of you who know me, you shouldn't be shocked that I said fake news. But for me, and what we'll explore tonight through a meditation is about creating conditions to survey the thoughts, to survey the quality of mind that generates and perpetuates content. It's stepping back into what we call witness consciousness and seeing if what the mind is saying makes sense. Does it serve you anymore? Because many thoughts that we have served a purpose long ago. Like my anger was a protective mechanism. And when I realized that I was like popping off and about to curse people out for no damn reason other than I was pissed all the time, like that's when I was like, oh, you got to check that, dog. You know what I mean? So like we have to figure out ways to refine our awareness because thoughts are ephemeral, like I said, in and of themselves, they're empty. They have no substance other than what we invest in them. And because I'm an existential philosophy major, I kind of have to say this too. Descartes famously uttered, I think, therefore I am. Yeah, nah, dude, no. I'm going to dispute that from a mindfulness and from a Buddhist cosmological perspective. Thoughts are insubstantial in and of themselves, but the way we latch onto them the way we repeat them impact us individually and collectively. Our true nature is witness consciousness, bearing witness to the thoughts, bearing witness to the body, bearing witness to emotions, and then seeing if that's true or not. A question that often comes up in mindfulness practice is like, is this true? Is what I'm seeing true? Or is it rooted in a thought? Is it rooted in a pattern? Is it rooted in an emotion? Did I just have a bad day? Right? So coming into an understanding of that in a way that allows you to find liberation as opposed to being stuck. Or again, for those who want modern parlance, some of us are using Windows 98 in a Mac OS 13 world, right? And mindfulness of thought gives us the chance to upgrade our operating system. And as we upgrade our operating system, we can become more aware of the energy expenditure that comes from outdated tracks, right? Have you tried, for those of you who are old enough to remember dial-up internet, right? Can you imagine, like, this meeting would be painful on a dial-up connection, right? Like, you would hear one word and then it would, like, whatever. So, like, think of that in our context of mindfulness of thoughts. Like, there's some operating system we need some operating system override. Right. We have systems in our mind that are like straight out of 1986, like pre-Windows 98. It's like DOS, right? So mindfulness of thought gives us, and shout out to my computer geeks out there, like the mindfulness of thought gives you a chance to bear witness to your internal operating system and then choose what works, right? So if you want to stay on Windows 98, sweet. But then you can't complain when the network crashes, right? Like, but if you care to upgrade to the latest version, one that suits your life right now, it just gives you space and grace to operate with a little bit more flexibility, right? So I'll pause there to see if anyone has any questions, because again, I don't like to throw stuff out. I like to digest, and have conversations. So any thoughts or reflections, just raise your hand or put it in the chat. Nothing. Interesting. Patty, what you got?
I'll talk because it's quicker.
Right.
So I think, because we're living in these times, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hypervigilance.
Right.
So I'm curious, like what does your method look like? Like, can you talk us through your own personal method when you're triggered? Because I love what you're saying about divine space, like the divine pause. And I tend to just go straight into reaction. And I was wondering if you can walk us through how you find that when you're, when you're triggered or.
For sure. I'll do that. That's next. But yeah, I'll totally do that. Thank you, Patty. Anyone else care to offer anything into the space or question, comment? Laurent says, I like the analogy of cleaning up your OS from spyware, all those things that start when you log in without knowing or wanting, taking over your CPU. And right. It's literally like that, right? Like we have viruses here that we aren't necessarily aware of. And what mindfulness does is it gives us the space to see them. And, sometimes we know that, for those of you who work in computers, extracting a virus is painful sometimes. But you can either have a corrupt operating system or an upgrade. And something like the pain of the upgrade is sometimes worth it, right? Christine says I need to defrag. See, shout out to my nerds. I knew that was going to land. I love that, right? Defrag for sure. Lisa has a question. What do you mean by hypervigilance? And she's asking, would you say more?
Sure. I'm trying to think of a good definition. So, well, I'll give you an example from my life. So, and I do recognize that I do come from a place of privilege. My husband, though, has a heart condition that might one day require transplantation. So during a pandemic, right? It's kind of scary because he is immune compromised, and he also is a teacher and he works in a school, and he loves his job. He loves it, and I love that he loves working with teenagers. It's not an easy thing, but I'm scared a lot of the time, and so I'm constantly scanning him for signs of illness. And then I have family members, for example, who are really pushing back against public health measures. And I take that personally, right? That whole idea is like, well, they have underlying conditions, they're going to die anyway, right? Like,
oops.
Yeah, they don't say that, but I feel like I hear that. It's kind of like the story I tell myself, or like the trigger, right? It's like, and so I think that's the hypervigilance that I'm talking about. So I'm constantly checking him, and I'm checking the world, because I want him to be safe, in the world. And then when you look at what's happening around about issues of race and everything else, and the incredible injustice that's happening, and it's hard not to be like, jumping all over people all the time. And so that's what I mean. So finding that pause is difficult for me, to try to find that place of understanding where other people are coming from, or just like, not everything's a health emergency.
Right. Yeah. So
that's kind of what I mean. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, Lisa raised her thumb. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Super helpful.
Yeah, Lisa, thanks for the question. Patty, thanks for the explanation. And I think that part of the reason I'm ecstatic that so many people showed up to like my blind solicitation is that we need a opportunity to revisit our mental health. Right? Mindfulness is an opportunity for you to bear witness to what has happened to the mind. Right? Like, our minds have withstood the equivalent of tectonic shock in the United States for 5 years. Right. Then you throw a pandemic on top of that. So we have new habits that have been, Laurent is totally going everywhere like with this analogy. Thanks, buddy. But we have habits that were necessitated by the pandemic that, as things shift, may still be necessary, but may not. Right. Or they may be necessary, but maybe not as vigilant. And so the only way to strengthen the pause is to find it and stay there, right? And so that's what tonight's exercises will be about. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? But this what we're doing here is why I'm offering this space, right? Like, it's why I ask for questions, why like we talk about practice like together, as opposed to me being just like, and then this, because we can learn from each other. Again, and that guru culture, it's not my vibe. Not my vibe. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, favorite colors? Mine's purple. But some of y'all knew that. Val, what you got?
Oh, I was just gonna say that Windows 98 analogy and trying to work with Windows 2019. I'm like, Reggie, you you hit it, and just trying to deal with people that are still there. It's just really amazing, because you know people on their path, and you try to give grace for their path, but I'm just like, how you living? I mean, still stuck in 98, and it's 2022. And yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, it's other people, but the other thing too is sometimes it's us.
Yeah, sometimes it is me too, because certain things I'm stuck to, but you just have to remember to just pause a minute and try to listen to what they're trying to tell you.
And that's why like these practices are important, because our goal is to tend to our garden.
Yeah.
And as we tend to our garden, I mean, I'm living proof of this. Like, my garden is so robust. Like, I'm sharing the fruits of my garden with y'all. I'm like, yo, you want mango? Like this garden is so robust. I'm like, here. I can't eat all of this here. right? And maybe they'll eat it, maybe they won't. But like mindfulness practice for me, another analogy that I use is like dethatching like the garden of your mind, right? And planting and creating conditions for fertile soil for the blossoms of beautiful thought to manifest, right? For those of you who dig in the dirt, dethatching is a B. IT, fill in the blank, right? However, when you do that work and then you plant the seeds in that soil, what manifests from that is not only beautiful, but it creates conditions for other people to receive. Yeah. So let's practice, y'all. Let's start with a basic practice and then we'll go a little bit deeper. So we're gonna have a 1-minute practice to do your best. Again, curiosity, not critique. I'll say that again. Curiosity, not critique. Do your best to count all the thoughts that cross your mind in 1 minute. Bearing in mind that counting is a thought. Don't get too meta. This is not that class, right? Right. But like, so, and when you count the thoughts, maybe you're like thinking, okay, like, so just count them and that's it, right? No judgment. And some of you, like myself, will probably be at like 16 in the first 10 seconds, but just count and the timer starts now. All we're doing is counting thoughts. Now pause. And before you write down a number, maybe some of your thoughts were pictures. Maybe some of your thoughts were words. Maybe your thought was, I'm not thinking anything. That's a thought. So, for those inclined, put the number of thoughts that you had into the chat. Pat. Shout out to my journalist. Pat said 23. And what did you notice, right? What insights did you gain? Lori talked about she had a feeling involved.
Yeah, I feel like it's starting to unpack everything from the last 2 years. And then everyday life starts piling on top of everything that
Yeah.
I find every once in a while I get this dread, like just out of the blue, a feeling of dread. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that at all. Just comes and goes real quick, but or like at night when you're trying to go to sleep and it's just one thing, it's there and I know that's all the pent up emotion from being the strong one, being whatever, for my friends and for my family through quarantine. And it's just, and it fleets. It's like, it's there for a second. It doesn't hang, but it's definitely that a heaviness. And I didn't expect it right now doing that. So
Right.
I was interested.
Well, the one thing I'll say, and then we'll go into a deeper practice, is that when we give ourselves the space, the mind can relax, and when the mind relaxes, then it takes off the mask, right? We talk about ourselves being the strong one. Sometimes our mind has to play the strong one, and then when we give ourselves space, the mind's like, whoo, and then it just like goes. So that, but what I'm hopeful that everyone felt is like curiosity, right? Maybe a little bit of fun, but also dread, like the complexity that exists in the mind, but also the opportunity that exists to see what's going on that we may not even be aware of. And it's in that opportunity to see things that we can choose to do I really want to stay here? Do I want to figure this out? Do I want to like create more space? Those sorts of things, right? So thank you for indulging me. Um, some shout out to the see fake news, fake conversations, right? Like it's not a bad thing. That's just what we notice, right? So what I want you to do now, we're going to take a deeper practice. This will probably be like 8 to 10 minutes. So find a posture that allows you to feel relaxed and dignified and just shake off what you just experienced, right? Most people don't. I'm a yoga teacher and Buddhist trained meditation teacher, so there has to be somatic engagement in my classes. Like that's just how I operate. So once you shake off what we just experienced, find a posture again that allows you to feel relaxed, alert, spacious, and dignified. Feel the ground beneath you as a sense of rooting and support, and allow that awareness of the ground beneath the feet to bring other relaxation to the body. And begin to cultivate a sense of compassionate, neutral, loving awareness, that quality of mindfulness, as you sit in dignity. For those of you that need to breathe deeper, please do so. Notice the sensations in the body and allow the exhale to soften whatever tension exists in the body. If the deeper breath isn't available to you, perhaps placing hands on the knees, one hand over the heart, one hand over the belly, just anything that allows you to feel a bit more grounded. And we're going to do some exploration into thoughts. So for now, just settle into the breath, settle into the body. And at some point, a strong thought or sensation will likely emerge and seek to divert your attention from that peaceful awareness that we've been cultivating. And when that happens, take notice of the thought without attachment. Meaning, so if a sense of dread comes up, perhaps you're like, hello, dread, and then let it pass. To-do list comes to mind. What's up, planning? Let it pass. Hypervigilance, be like, hey, hypervigilance, good to see you again. Let it pass. And again, naming the thought according to its predominant quality. So you can say things like planning, remembering, judging, worrying, fear, happy, creative, painful. Just be creative with that. Perhaps noticing that simply by naming and acknowledging the thought, how that's supportive of bearing witness, how that's supportive of mindfulness. And as we strengthen this capacity, thoughts pass like water might in a bubbling brook, or as clouds might pass in a clear blue sky. Also giving you perspective to see it as an object rather than as a subject. Now consider the space between each thought. And even if it's small, rest your awareness in that space. And if that's a bit too esoteric, just notice the space between the thoughts, even if it's a split second. Now take a moment, the next thought that comes into your awareness, examine it, and notice, if anything, how it makes you feel. Where do you feel it? And allow yourself to be fully aware of the feeling. Then at the bottom of the next exhale, let the thought pass. Spend the next few breaths allowing residual attachment to the previous thought to pass. Perhaps feeling the ground beneath the feet, perhaps touching the fingers one to another, the thumb to all the fingers. Just to allow the thought to completely pass through. Now bring to mind a thought that perhaps makes you angry. Then examine that as well. Where do you feel it? Does this thought spark other things, other awareness? Allow yourself to be fully absorbed in this for a breath or two. Then at the bottom of the next exhale, let it pass. Lastly, bring to mind a loving thought, something that makes you smile or maybe even giggle. Anyone who knows me loves it. Knows I love a good giggle. Where do you feel that? Does this spark other emotions or other sensations? Allow your awareness to fully explore this sensation. Then at the bottom of the next exhale, let that thought pass. Now simply return again to a sense of groundedness in the body, a breath that gives you comfort and space in your dignified posture. And notice what we just did. We allowed ourselves to feel the feels with various thoughts, examine them, then let them pass, and then come back home. And it's this repetition, it's this ability to practice not only the experience, but the release of the experience. It allows you to become more peaceful. And even as thoughts come and go, the ability to come back home is the essence of mindfulness. So spend a few more breaths cradled not only in your awareness of mindfulness, but in the awareness that other people are here with you. There are 34 of us here together. All working on creating more loving awareness for self, for mind, and for one another. Allow yourself to return to the space in a place, in a way that gives you grace. Gratitude to you all for participating. So any thoughts, any reflections, either put them in the chat or raise your hand. Patty, what you got?
A few things, of course, I'm trying not to overanalyze, but there are three big things that I felt a deep appreciation for, so that I can think of.
Well played.
One is, I think what I found really interesting with this approach is that, like, in the past when I've done meditation, it's like you recognize things as thinking. But what I found really interesting with this approach is you gave us a slightly larger vocabulary for that. So I think if you're overly analytical, which is something that I do suffer from, allowing you to recognize something else, you use hypervigilant, which really triggered, stuck in my brain. It's like, oh yes, but what was an emotion? What was creativity? Because I think even though when you label something as thinking in my head, I tended to assign it as bad, but giving the opportunity to categorize it kind of gave me a more expansive view of that. So that was one really big thing that I really enjoyed about that approach. And then you said something that I really toyed with me, and that was thoughts as an object instead of as a subject. And I'm like, so it was like something just to hold on to enough to come back. So that was another one. And then the third one was the experimentation, but it was sort of a gentle experimentation by thinking of what makes you feel angry. I could feel my breath catch like almost immediately. What makes you feel, I think it was grateful, then the expansiveness comes. And it was a really good demonstration of what the thought does to us without overthinking it,
Right.
So I think those are the three big takeaways for me.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Rebecca, like you can say that if you want to, but I love what Rebecca said. She said that this was so helpful in the process of moving. Yeah, well, I'm glad that we were able to give you that space, because like moving is not a pleasant experience, even if you're prepared for it. But being aware of that and giving yourself space. I mean, I know when I move, sometimes I forget stuff because I get all wrapped up, right? So like mindfulness doesn't just apply to just like the abstract. It can be applied to the concrete, which is one of the things I like to offer. Christine says, my anger and my laughter live on opposite sides of my heart. Wow, right. It's more literal than I had expected, for sure. Any other thought? Oh, Pat had a question. Can you give us 3 things to think about when tending to our gardens? Well, we're past time, so if anyone needs to drop, go for it. I'll send you the recording. But for those that want to linger, like, we'll hold space. So 3 things to think about when tending to our gardens. One is just like, what do you want to grow? Right? So what do you want to plant? Then what conditions, what are the conditions of the soil required for that to take root? And then quoting my root teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, is like, how can we water the seeds of what we just planted for it to flourish and be nourished? Right? So what do you want to grow? How do I prepare the soil to receive the seed? And then once I plant the seed, how do I nourish it? Was that too fast? I was trying to like bring out my southern side and talk a little slower. Megan, and thank you for so I hold difficult emotions in my stomach. Rebecca, you're welcome. Blessings on the move. Yeah, and that's the thing that and Brene Brown talks about this in terms of just like, and some people have different thoughts about her. I for one tend to like her because she expands our vocabulary. Like, when we have different vocabulary to express our feelings, it gives us more space to process, right? So the beauty of mindfulness practice for me is that it's not only expanded my vocabulary, but it's expanded my awareness to be able to articulate, right? So when I was younger, I was just pissed all the time. But now I'm just like slightly annoyed or somewhat bothered or rather pissed. You know what I mean? So like it's that it sounds semantic at first, but like when you expand your vocabulary, it gives you an opportunity to not only be playful with mental experiences, but also, again, like, curiosity is far more important than critique. You know, critique, I'm the worst, I'm so stupid, or like, why did that person cut me off? Don't they know? No, they don't know. They don't know you. They might be trying, like, maybe they had a crap day at work. You know what I mean? So like, those are the things that, like, mindfulness and this questioning allows us to see, right? So Pat, was that good? Did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, it answered my question. I've got it. I had already started writing down some things about the garden. And so then I just wanted a real quickie because I might just put something on my computer at work just to keep remembering about what it is that we're supposed to be growing. So
Right on.
this is very helpful, though, because I do think that sometimes we get overwhelmed with whatever it is we think we're supposed to be doing, how we're supposed to be changing, how we're supposed to be getting better, improving ourselves, and then we get overwhelmed, and then we want to do it all at one time. But as I know that I got some herbs here, I got my indoor garden, I can't put a ton of stuff in a big pot, and it's not all going to make it. So we have to learn how to parcel it out and do it the right way. So yes, this was helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions or reflections? Otherwise, we'll have a silent sit. Silent on your part. On my part, I will thank all of you by name, because that's just how I get down. And if I mispronounce your name, please tell me compassionately, and I will change my tune. So any other questions, thoughts, or comments? Either unmute or put it in the chat. I hope this has been helpful in terms of just like creating conditions for broader awareness. But also broader compassion for self, because like the biggest thing about compassion is like non-judgmental, loving awareness, right? Not the I'm so stupid, why did I do this? I'm awful, la la la. Yeah, sure. And you're also beautiful and magical, and life is beautiful and magical, right? So life is a both and experience as opposed to an either or. So in conclusion, dear ones, find an upright posture that allows you to take in a deep breath and just reflect on what we've learned together. Now you know how it feels when you shift from being absorbed in thought to simply naming it. You notice the impact of how thoughts trigger and the bodily effect. That knowledge is power. So allow the breath to be deep and full, allow the heart to be open, mind to be as clear as possible. And whatever remains with you here, spend the next minute or so nourishing that. And as you tend to your garden, I will tend to mine. So thank you, Monica, Valerie, Lori D, Beth, Lisa, Lori, Stephanie, Margie, Hannah, Pat, Patty, Lisa B, Catherine, Eleanor, Eunice, Brenton, birthday girl, Megan, Emma, Christine, Kristen, Angie, Jennifer, Georgia, Marilyn, Denise, Mallory, Alyssa, Laurent, and those who had to leave early, Christy Ann and Rebecca. Deep gratitude to each of you for showing up. Hopefully you can show up again next week. If not, just sign up and I'll send you the recording. 3 tolls of the bowl, then we will depart. Deep full inhale, please. Exhale, clear. Deep full inhale. Exhale, clear. Deep full inhale. Exhale, clear. From my heart to yours, I bow before each of you in gratitude for allowing me to be of service. However else I can be of service, please reach out. I'll send you notes and video this evening. Until next time, love, grace, and peace.
So Reggie, the link to it, is it the same each week?
No.
No? Okay, so I need to sign up again?
You don't, because I know how you are. No. Love ya.